Steve pushed the apartment door open with his shoulder. The lock had been sticking for 3 weeks, and his hands were full of grocery bags. Across the threshold, he was greeted by a smell he had learned to recognize with his eyes closed. Chili. Beef, beans, tomatoes, and that particular spice mix that Amy added only on Wednesdays. He kicked off his sneakers in the hallway, walked into the kitchen and saw her. Amy stood by the open medicine cabinet, wearing his old faded t-shirt with a stretched collar. The shirt came down almost to her knees, and Steve had always found that sight endearing. She was sorting through blister packs, bottles, expired tubes of ointment, frowning in concentration. A professional habit. Even at home, the pharmacist checked expiration dates. "Hey," he said, setting the bag on the Walmart table they had assembled together amid a mix of argument and laughter. "Doing inventory again?" "Hey," she replied without turning around. "There's aspirin from last year here. Needs to go." He came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. She smelled of apple shampoo and just a hint of hydrogen peroxide, even though it was her day off. That smell had come to mean home for Steve. They were both 24. They had been married exactly 1 year, and that year felt like the best of Steve's life. Sure, they lived modestly. A sagging couch from the previous renters, covered with a blanket to hide the dip in the middle. On the wall, cheap love letter decor that Amy had bought online. The L was slightly crooked because the double-sided tape had given way, but they never got around to fixing it. Steve worked as a ride-share driver in a gray Toyota Corolla he leased from a local fleet. Every morning while the car warmed up, he would open the website of the big metal fabrication plant on his phone. Check the job openings. Nothing. For 6 months. Sometimes a janitor position or a general laborer would pop up, but the pay was half what he made behind the wheel. He kept waiting. Amy worked as a pharmacist at a CVS-style chain called MedSafe, a standard fluorescent-lit store with green shelves and a flickering light above the register. She stocked displays, checked certificates, put up with grumpy old ladies who demanded that cheap generic they discontinued. She came home tired but never complained. They were saving for a down payment on a small house, putting away a little at a time, Steve's tips, Amy's bonuses. They had $23,000 saved up. In 2 years they planned to have a kid. First, a place of their own, then a baby. Everything was going according to plan. Evenings they watched Netflix. Amy would fall asleep on his shoulder. He would finish the episode, then carefully move her to the pillow and turn off the light. He thought this was happiness. Quiet, invisible love without fireworks. But there was one odd thing Steve noticed but never dwelled on. Sometimes, when their conversation turned to how they met or their engagement, Amy would suddenly trail off. Her eyes would go glassy. She would zone out for a few seconds, then come back with a forced smile. Steve blamed it on fatigue, work, stress. He didn't push. He didn't know that inside Amy's head there was a black box. She had locked it with 1,000 padlocks and thrown away the key. Inside that box lay an event that had happened 2 weeks before the wedding. Amy had convinced herself it was a glitch, a hallucination, a waking nightmare. She buried the memory so deep that she almost believed it wasn't real. She loved Steve, truly, no doubt about that. But the past has a way of breathing. Part 2. 2 weeks before the vows. 1 year ago, August, the heat was so fierce that the asphalt seemed to soften underfoot and the air above car hoods shimmered. Amy sat on a bench outside their apartment building. On her finger, an engagement ring with a tiny cubic zirconia that Steve had spent 3 hours choosing, comparing sizes and cuts. She looked at it, twisted it, and inside she felt a mix of happiness and dread. Happiness because Steve was reliable, kind, caring. He never raised his voice, never forgot her birthday, brought her coffee in bed on weekends. Dread because the wedding was 14 days away and everything was going wrong. The dress fitting was a nightmare. The seamstress had messed up the size, and the bodice squeezed her ribs so she could barely breathe. The budget had doubled. Turns out the reception hall charged extra for sound equipment, and the florist doubled her price for Saturday delivery. And her future mother-in-law, Steve's mom, a strong-willed woman used to being in charge, called every evening to criticize the menu. "Amy, really? Meatloaf? That's so last century. Do a caprese salad instead. And lose the pink decorations, it's tacky." Amy sat on the bench, gripping her phone, feeling tears rise in her throat. She didn't want caprese. She wanted a normal wedding with normal people, dancing till dawn, and maybe a cheap champagne toast. But Steve's mom was paying for half, so arguing felt rude. Just then a dark blue Volkswagen Jetta pulled up in front of her. Tinted windows rolled down, and a painfully familiar face leaned out. Dennis. She didn't recognize him at first. A year ago he had gone into the army, skinny, awkward, perpetually messy hair. Now a different person sat before her. Muscular, short haircut, a hard look in his eyes. That cocky grin that only comes from military service and 6 months of civilian life where you start feeling like a king. "Amy," he drawled, getting out of the car. "Fancy meeting you here. Sitting here looking sad. And what a pretty little ring. Don't tell me you found someone." She stood up. Her heart pounded in her throat. Dennis was her ex. They had broken up a month before his deployment. She didn't want to wait 2 years. He got angry, called her a traitor, and went off to boot camp with a chip on his shoulder. They hadn't seen each other since. "Hey, Dennis, how are you?" "Great," he said, sitting down on the bench next to her, moving close. She smelled his cologne. Expensive, sharp, with notes of leather and tobacco. Nothing like the old him. "Did my time, came back, and you? I hear you're getting married. To who, if it's not a secret?" "To Steve. He drives for Uber. He's a good man." Dennis smirked, an unfriendly smirk. "An Uber driver? Are you serious, Ames? You, a pretty girl like you, gonna sit in some crappy apartment pinching pennies? Meanwhile, I'm back. I've got a business, an apartment downtown." He was lying. There was no business. The apartment was rented, but his voice was convincing. Amy didn't know why she didn't just stand up and leave. Maybe because she was exhausted. Because of the mother-in-law, the dress fitting, the meatloaf versus caprese, the constant feeling that she was failing. And here was an old flame telling her she deserved more. "Dennis, stop it. I'm getting married in 2 weeks. I love Steve." "Love?" He took her hand. His palm was hot, rough. "Didn't you love me? We were together." "That's over. It's in the past." "Amy, I missed you." His voice suddenly went soft, almost pleading. "I thought about you every night in the barracks. Your hair, your eyes. And you're marrying some Uber driver hauling drunks around in a Corolla?" She should have stood up and left, but her body didn't listen. Stress, exhaustion, the smell of his cologne, all mixed into a cocktail that went to her head. Dennis sensed her hesitation. "Let's just go for a drive. Talk like old times. I'm not going to try anything, I promise." She got into the car. That was the first mistake. They drove around town. Dennis talked about the army, about basic training, about having to peel potatoes for 500 guys. Amy listened with half an ear, staring out the window. The sun was setting. Street lights came on. Then they stopped in a dead end by some garages. Quiet. Just a dog barking somewhere. Dennis killed the engine and turned to her. "Amy," he said, I want to kiss you. No, Denise, no. Take me back. But he didn't listen. He leaned over the center console, pulled her toward him. Amy tried to push him away, but her arms felt weak. Because deep down, something old, something reckless stirred. The kind of rush she'd read about in romance novels, but never thought she'd feel. Shameful, dirty, but just once, only once. It happened in the backseat of his Jetta. Fast, awkward, joyless. Amy felt almost nothing, neither pleasure nor pain, only emptiness and disgust at herself. She lay on the leather seat, staring at the roof, thinking, what am I doing? Why? Steve is at home right now, probably making dinner or cleaning his Corolla, and I'm here. Denise, satisfied, pulled out his phone. Amy didn't notice at first. She was dressing with shaking hands, trying to button her shirt. Then came the soft click of a camera. What are you doing? She asked, panicked. Just for memories, he grinned. You're so pretty, don't worry. Delete it right now. Relax, I won't show anyone, it's just for me. Amy tried to grab the phone, but he had already slipped it into his pocket. She didn't fight him, she had no strength left. Only a cold, sticky fear settled under her ribs. Take me home, she said in an icy voice. Then he shrugged and started the engine. On the drive back, he chattered about this and that, suggested they start seeing each other, said they made a great couple. Amy said nothing. When the car stopped at her building, she jumped out without even saying goodbye. At home, she stripped off her clothes, got in the shower, and stood under hot water for almost an hour, as if trying to wash away everything that had happened. The next morning, she woke up with an iron resolve. Denise no longer existed. She erased him from her life, deleted his number, blocked him on social media, forced herself to forget. The wedding happened 2 weeks later. Amy cried with joy at the courthouse when Steve slid the ring onto her finger. She believed the past was dead. She didn't know that the dead past had a phone with a photograph. Part 3. The Ghost Returns. Wednesday, October. Rain drummed on the awning of the NetSafe pharmacy, creating a steady lulling noise. Inside, as usual in the middle of the week, a line of elderly customers had formed. They rustled their shopping bags, chatted, coughed into their fists. Amy, in her white lab coat, rang up prescriptions. Her movements were practiced, automatic. Scanner, register, change, receipt. She smiled at each old lady, though inside she felt drained. The last few days had been hard. Steve was sick with a cold, and she was worried. Just a regular cold, but he always took even a slight fever badly. That morning she had left him hot tea with honey on the nightstand and gone to work. Could I get some of that generic blood pressure medicine? Droned an elderly woman. The little white ones, not the capsules. Amy nodded, turned to the shelf, and froze. In the doorway stood Dennis. She recognized him instantly. The same cocky posture, the same short haircut, the same expensive cologne that overpowered the smell of medications. He was smiling, arms crossed, watching her like a cat watching a mouse. "Hey there, married lady," he said, walking up to the counter. The line of customers went quiet, sensing trouble. "Missed me? Your husband feeding you okay?" Amy felt the blood rush to her face and then drain away, leaving cold. Her voice, trained on the rudest customers, came out flat and merciless. "Do you need cough medicine or something for a headache? I'm not interested." Denise pretended to be hurt, put a hand over his heart. "Wow, so cold. You weren't like that before, remember? In the car, for example." "Get out," Amy said louder, "or I'll call security." He didn't leave. Instead, he leaned over the counter and touched her hand. His fingers slid over her wrist, and Amy jerked her hand back so hard She knocked over a stack of blister packs. They hit the floor with a dry crackle. "Don't touch me," she hissed. "I said leave." Something shifted in Dennis's eyes. The offense turned to anger. He straightened up, adjusted his jacket, and looked at her with narrowed eyes. "Fine, you'll regret this," he whispered so softly that only she could hear. "You will, Amy." He turned and walked out, slamming the glass door. Amy stood motionless for several seconds, trying to stop her knees from shaking. Then she turned to the line and forced a smile. "Sorry about that. Next, please." She hoped it was just a bad encounter, that Dennis would cool off and forget. She didn't know that he had already opened a Facebook group called Rideshare Drivers of Springfield. Part 4. A world shatters in 1 second. Steve was driving a passenger to the airport. The road was slick, a light rain falling, wipers scraping rhythmically. The passenger, a heavy-set man in a leather jacket, spent the whole trip on the phone about some contracts, ignoring the driver. Steve was used to it. Better than passengers who want to chat when you're dead tired after a 12-hour shift. At a red light, he automatically checked his phone. A text from Amy an hour ago. "How are you? Did you take your temperature? I got you antibiotics. Pick them up tonight." He started to type a reply when a new notification popped up. An unknown number. A photo. A message. "Greetings from your fiancée. This was 2 weeks before your wedding. She tell you about it? And what happened after? Well, look. She came running when I got back from the army." Steve opened the image. The screen exploded with color. Long hair spread across a leather seat. The familiar curve of a back. Very familiar. He knew that curve because he saw it every night when Amy fell asleep on her stomach. Arms out. The profile, slightly blurry but unmistakably her. Her nose, her lips, the tiny mole behind her left ear. The interior of a Volkswagen Jetta. The photo's metadata showed the date, exactly 14 days before their courthouse wedding. Steve didn't realize his foot was slamming the gas pedal. The Corolla lurched forward, swerved. The passenger dropped his phone. "Dude, what the hell?" he shouted. "You crazy? That was a red light." Steve barely managed to wrench the wheel. The car scraped the curb with a screech of tires. The man in the leather jacket turned pale. "Out," Steve said flatly, pulling over. "What? I'm gonna miss my flight." "You'll have to get another ride. Sorry. My wife just died." He made up the lie on the spot just to get rid of the man. The passenger muttered something, got out, slammed the door. Steve didn't watch him go. He stared at the phone. The photo. Again. Zoom in. See the details that would kill him for good. There was her little silver ring on her pinky. The one he'd given her for their first anniversary. There was her tiny bird tattoo on her left side. He knew that too. He had kissed it 100 times. 2 weeks before the wedding. While he was renting the apartment, saving for the ring, booking the hall, while he thought they were building a future together, she was giving herself to someone else, in the back seat. He didn't finish the thought. His hands were shaking. He dialed Amy's number but hung up before she answered. Not yet. First, he had to see her eyes, in person. The Corolla spun around on the wet asphalt and raced toward the pharmacy. Steve sped, ran yellow lights, honked at pedestrians. One thought pounded in his head. She lied. All this time she lied. A year of smiles, a year of tenderness, a year he thought was the happiest of his life, all a lie. He burst into the pharmacy like a hurricane. The glass door hit the wall with a crash, and he knocked over a display stand of vitamins. Colorful bottles, boxes, blister packs rained onto the tile floor with a cacophony like broken music. The line of old people scattered. Someone gasped. Someone clutched their chest. "You filthy liar!" Steve roared, seeing nothing but the white lab coat behind the counter. Amy looked up. Her face went slack. Her eyes widened. "Steve? What happened? You're sick. You shouldn't be." He didn't let her finish. The phone, the one with the photo, slapped down on the counter, screen up. The image, zoomed to the max, displayed for everyone to see. The women in line gasped. The young cashier at the next register covered her mouth. Amy went so pale that her lips matched her face. "So," Steve's voice thundered through the pharmacy, distorted with rage and pain. "While I was renting our apartment, buying your ring, arguing with your mother about the menu, you were spreading your legs for him? Go ahead, tell everyone here how you crawled around in the back seat of some stranger's car right before our wedding." The words sliced the air like shards of glass. Amy opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Only a rasp came out. It was one time," she whispered, though no one but the first old lady in line could hear her. "I was scared. I didn't know what to do. Steve, please." "Shut up." He slammed his fist on the counter, making the register jump. "Don't you dare come home tonight. I'll send your stuff to your mom's. You're not my wife. You're a liar." He turned and walked to the exit. His boots left wet prints on the tile. No one tried to stop him. The line parted before him like the Red Sea. The door banged shut. Through the glass, they could see him get into the Corolla and peel away. Silence fell in the pharmacy. Amy stood gripping the edge of the counter. Her white lab coat, so neat a moment ago, now looked like a shroud. She looked at the women in line. They looked back, some with condemnation, some with pity, some just curious. Somewhere behind her, a dropper bottle fell and shattered. That sound was the last straw. Amy slowly sank onto the stool behind the register. Her legs wouldn't hold her. Tears ran down her cheeks, leaving no tracks, because he was no longer trying to hold them back. "Amy," her co-worker, a young woman named Sarah, said cautiously, "Can I get you some water?" Amy didn't answer. She stared at the door her husband had just walked out of, and understood that this day had cut her life in two, before and after. Part 5. Exile. Steve at home. He didn't remember the drive. The road had vanished from memory, a grey blur of traffic lights and turns he made on autopilot. The key stuck again. His shoulders slammed the door so hard the frame cracked. The apartment greeted him with the smell of chili, yesterday's. Amy had left the pot on the stove. Steve walked over, looked at the cold fat congealed on top, and threw up in the sink. Then he opened the closet. Her clothes, dresses, jeans, blouses, all neatly hung, all smelling of her apple shampoo. He ripped them off the hangers and threw them into trash bags from under the sink, first slowly, then faster. Her hair clips in the bag. Her cat mug she drank coffee from every morning, in the bag, let it break. Her bunny slippers in the bag. Reaching the top shelf, he found the wedding album. Thick navy blue cover with embossing. They had ordered it from a professional studio. Paid almost $300, even though the budget was stretched thin. Amy had said, "This is for life. We'll show it to our grandkids." Steve opened the album. First page, them at the courthouse. Amy laughing, head thrown back, her eyes full of what he had thought was happiness. He looked at that photo for a minute, maybe two. Then he tore out the page, crumpled it, and threw it in the bag. The rest followed. The $300 album turned into a pile of torn paper and plastic sleeves. Steve pulled out his phone. He found Amy's mother's number, a quiet, meek woman who had always been kind to him. He typed a short message, no greetings. "Come get your daughter." She betrayed me. Reason, she cheated before the wedding. He sent it, muted the sound. Then for some reason he went to the bathroom, turned on the water and washed his hands for a long time. Not because they were dirty. He felt as if he had touched something defiled, her things, her traces in this apartment. The soap lathered, water ran down the drain, but the feeling of cleanliness never came. He turned off the water and sat on the edge of the tap. The apartment was quiet. Only the refrigerator hummed in the kitchen, and somewhere in the hallway, a door closed. Amy arrived at 9 that night. Steve heard her footsteps on the landing, heavy, uncertain. Then a knock on the door, soft at first, then louder. "Steve, please open up." Her voice was wet with tears. "I can explain everything. It was a goodbye to the past. I didn't want to. I don't know how it happened." He stood in the hallway, forehead against the wall. The bathroom light was still on. On the hook hung his jacket and her parka, side by side, as always. "Steve!" She was pounding with her fist now. "I love you. Just forgive me. One time. Only one time." He said nothing. The words stuck in his throat like bones. "Please!" She began to sob, and the sobs sounded like tearing fabric. "I can't live without you, not for 2 weeks." Steve took a deep breath and spoke in a low, terrifying voice, the voice of a man who had burned out inside. "You love me?" he said through the door. "You know what that is? Betrayal. You killed me. Not the accident, not the weakness. You killed me today, when I saw that photo. When I realized that for a whole year, I lived with someone who lied to me every second. I didn't lie. I just didn't tell you." "Shut up!" His voice broke into a scream, and Amy flinched on the other side. "Go back to your soldier boy. Let him comfort you." She shouted something else, but he wasn't listening. He went into the bedroom, put on headphones, and cranked up some old rock music that he and Amy both hated. But now he played it precisely because he hated that band. Through the bass, he barely heard her crying. Then the knocking stopped. He didn't know that Amy sat on the stairwell until midnight, curled up on the concrete steps in the same jacket she had worn to work that morning. She had nowhere to go. Her mother lived in another town. Her friends had drifted away. Dennis was the last person she would ever turn to. At midnight, a neighbor from across the hall came out, a red-faced woman in her 50s with a bottle of cheap wine. She looked at Amy with bleary eyes and spat. "What are you sitting there for? Get out of the way. Men don't need women who sit under doors all night." Amy got up. Her legs were numb. She went down to the first floor, walked outside, and stumbled into the night. The rain had stopped, but the asphalt glistened under the streetlights. She didn't know where to go. She just walked. Part 6. Revenge and its price. 3 days later, Steve filed for divorce. The courthouse was old, with high ceilings and a smell of mothballs. He stood in line at the filing window, holding a folder of documents, the marriage certificate, a copy of the photo. The clerk, with a tired face, glanced through the papers without looking up. "Reason for dissolution?" "Loss of trust and marital infidelity," Steve said. His voice didn't waver. The woman gave him a brief look of sympathy. She saw people like him every day, young, broken, empty eyes. "Pay the fee at the kiosk," she said. "You'll get a court date in about a month." Steve nodded. He walked outside and lit a cigarette, though he had quit 6 months ago. Smoke mixed with his breath as he watched the white clouds dissolve into the gray sky. But the divorce was only the beginning. Inside him lived a black, sticky rage with nowhere to go. He couldn't beat up Dennis. That would land him in jail. He couldn't take Amy back. He didn't want to. He couldn't forget. The photo was in front of his eyes every minute, so he decided that justice would be served by his own hands. The next day, Steve went to a photo shop in a strip mall. He ordered a glossy print, 8.5 by 11 inches. He said it was for a family archive. The teenage clerk printed the file without looking and put it in an envelope. At home, Steve took out the print. Now it was large. Every detail under a magnifying glass. He looked at it for exactly 1 minute, then took a black marker. He wrote across the photo in large block letters, "Pharmacist Amy, shift 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Inquire within." At 3 in the morning, he drove to the pharmacy. The town was asleep. Only the street lights burned with a steady dead light. Steve got out of the car, looked around, no one. He pulled the print and a roll of white packing tape from a bag. On the glass door of the pharmacy, in the most visible spot, he taped the photo. Crisscrossed so it wouldn't come off easily. He stepped back and looked. Out of the darkness, his wife's enlarged face stared back at him. No, not his wife anymore. The liar. He got back in the Corolla and drove home. To sleep. For the first time in 3 days, he fell asleep without nightmares. In the morning, the pharmacy became a living hell. The janitor arrived first, saw the photo, cursed, tried to peel it off. The tape held like death. He called the manager. The manager arrived 10 minutes later. A woman in her 40s, stern, with permanent fatigue on her face. She looked at the picture, at the writing, and her face twisted. "Is that our Amy?" she asked the janitor. "Looks like it. Get it off now and call the police." But the photo wasn't removed until 10 o'clock when the police arrived. By then, dozens of people had walked past the pharmacy. Some took pictures with their phones. Some laughed. Some shook their heads. Amy didn't come in for her shift. She had called in sick, her blood pressure had spiked, and her doctor had ordered bed rest. But her co-workers called her, of course. Sarah, the cashier, dialed her at 9 in the morning. "Amy," Sarah's voice trembled. "Do you know what's on our door?" "What?" Amy asked weakly. She was lying in a short-term rental apartment she had rented the day before. Her mother had sent her money for the first month. "Your photo, the one from the phone. Someone printed it and taped it up with a message about you." Amy closed her eyes. She didn't cry. There were no tears left, only emptiness. "Got it," she said. "Thanks, Sarah." She hung up and stared at the ceiling. The wallpaper was cheap, with little flowers. Someone else's. She remembered looking at similar flowers in their bedroom next to Steve, how he held her in his sleep, how he whispered, "You're my sunshine." It was all over. Part 7. Bitter Endings. Amy called Dennis herself. She hesitated for a long time, but she had no one else. Her mother was in another town. Her friends had vanished. Some didn't want to get involved. Some judged her. Only the one who started it all remained. He met her at his rented apartment with that smug grin that seemed permanently glued to his face. "Oh, so you came after all," he said, letting her in. "What, he kicked you out? Hey, let's live together now. You were my ex. We looked good together." Amy looked at him, his muscular shoulders, his expensive cologne, his self-satisfied face. Suddenly she understood with absolute clarity that she hated him. Hated him more than she had ever hated anyone. "Why did you send him the photo?" she asked quietly. "What? Truth hurts?" He smirked. "You dumped me. I warned you. You'd regret it. And look, you do." She hit him, not weakly, not like a girl. She put all her pain, all her fear, all her ruined life into that punch. Her fist connected with Dennis's cheekbone. He grunted, staggered back, rubbed his face. "You!" he started, but Amy had already turned and walked out. She heard him shout insults after her, but she didn't look back. She took the elevator down, walked outside, and wandered toward the park. The October park was empty. The benches were wet, the paths covered in wet leaves. She sat on a bench by the pond, still wearing the same jacket she had worn the day she left home a week ago. 1 week. It felt like a lifetime. No one around, just ducks on the water, just the wind in the branches. Amy looked at the gray surface and thought that her life had ended not when she got into Dennis's car, not when Steve confronted her at the pharmacy, but today, when she realized she had nowhere to go. Not to her husband, not to her lover, not to friends. She was completely alone. Part 8. Rear-view mirror. Steve sat in his car. The night city rolled past, store windows, a few pedestrians, traffic lights switching from yellow to red. No passengers. He was just driving because he couldn't stand being home. The apartment still smelled of chili. He looked in the rear-view mirror. It reflected only his own eyes. Red, bloodshot, sleepless. The eyes of a man who had realized the main thing. There had been no happy year. There had been a lie, a thin, artfully woven deception in which he had lived like a bird in a gilded cage. He gripped the steering wheel. His knuckles went white. The next day, a job posting appeared on the website of the metal fabrication plant. CNC operator. Pay equal to what he made driving 2 shifts. He filled out the application, sent his resume. 3 hours later, they called back and invited him for an interview. The dream he had chased for 6 months. But there was no joy. Steve sat in the kitchen, drinking cold tea, staring at his phone. His mother had called 5 times. He called her back. "Mom," he said, and his voice cracked. "I'm getting a divorce. She betrayed me." There was silence on the line. Steve's mother, a simple factory worker who wasn't good with fancy words, found her voice. "Son," she said quietly, "call on." "You know, Mom," Steve continued, staring at the wall where the crooked love decor still hung. "The worst part is, I could have forgiven the accident, you know? One time, weak moment, a mistake. Maybe I could have gotten past it, but I can't forgive that photo on the pharmacy door." He paused, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Because I don't want to be that fool who pities her anymore. I pitied her for a year, when she was tired, when your mom was on her back, when she had a headache, and all that time she was—" He didn't finish. "Come home," his mother said. "Stay with us for a while. Get some rest." "Okay, Mom, I'll come." He hung up and went out onto the balcony. The night city breathed in his face with a cold October wind. Somewhere in this city, Amy lived. Probably sitting in some rented apartment, staring out the window too. He didn't wish her harm. He just wanted her to disappear. Like a nightmare you forget a minute after waking up. But nightmares don't get forgotten when they're printed on glossy 8.5 by 11 paper. Epilogue. What witnesses don't say. 3 months passed. Steve worked at the plant. CNC machine, metal shavings, a rotating shift schedule. He learned not to think. Just do his job, collect his paycheck, drive out to his mother's every 2 weeks. She baked him pies, stroked his head, and didn't ask questions. Amy quit the pharmacy. She left town. Now she works as a pharmacist at another chain, 200 miles away. She lives in a shared, rented room with another divorced woman. At night, she can't sleep. She scrolls through old photos on her phone, the ones where she and Steve are laughing. Then she cries and forces herself to close the gallery. Dennis still drives around in his Jetta. He found a new girlfriend. In a month, he'll probably dump her too. He's the kind who breaks toys and goes looking for new ones. The divorce was finalized. Steve didn't show up in court. He sent a representative. Amy was there. She sat on a bench, hiding her face, crying. The judge asked the formal question, "Reason for dissolution?" Steve's representative answered, "Irreconcilable differences based on loss of trust." Amy did not object. The cubic zirconia ring Steve sold on Facebook Marketplace for $40. He spent the money on gas. The love decor with the crooked L he never took down. He couldn't bring himself to do it. Too much was tied up in those 4 letters. Too much love. Too much lies. She thought that forgetting was the same as it never having happened. But in this world, there are 2 witnesses: the memory of a phone and the man whose heart you broke. And they never forget.